Welcome to EternalJourney, the podcast.
Greetings out there to all my Padawans and Knights. You're listening to EternalJourney, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on a limited play. I'm your host, Jedi. Joining me on the line, I have John.
Oh, that was abrupt. That's me.
Excellent. Totally leaving that in there. Awesome.
Good evening, guys.
It's fashionably late, that's all. You're holding the audience's suspense. Also on the line is Alex.
And also on the line is John. That was crazy. That was super fast. You just did. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Wow, way to put him on the spot twice. Good job.
Curveball night.
Yeah, no joke. And then we have a special guest with us today, someone that was responsible for creating the community card rating system. That's right, this lone person brought the entire Eternal community together to get their ratings on specific cards in the draft format to be a little more specific, a little more on point. And we want to welcome on the show today, Jedthehomarid. How you doing, Jed?
Hi, Jedi. Good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
We are happy to have you. And today's topic, which is why Jed's going to be here, is we're going to be talking about managing a slump. All of us have been in those situations where we're in a couple of losing streaks. We have maybe a couple of 0-1 or 0-3 and 1-3 drafts, or just you're having a hard time getting out of D3 or D1 in ladder. And so we're going to talk about those things. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. You can catch us streaming live every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Saturday, because that's how the week goes, at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. And then, of course, if you are not able to tune in live and have some live chats and interactions with us, you can check out our content on YouTube. Just search up EternalJourney on YouTube. And you catch also the video version of this podcast where I have all the cards that we talk about, as well as what's the plays and our pack one pick ones on screen for your viewing enjoyment. This leads us into our shout out section. So really quickly, want to give a big general shout out to everyone that has supported the channel throughout the time we have been streaming. As a complete surprise to me, on our last stream, we actually hit 1,000 followers. That's right, 1,000 people for some strange reason find me somewhat interesting, or at least enjoy my background noise. So we'll go with that one. Thank you guys so much. I would have never thought literally 1,000 people would find me interesting enough to click that follow button. But hey, we're here, we're doing it, and I owe it all to you guys. So thank you, each and every one of you. Couple other shout outs. Welcoming to the Jedi Order this week, we have AK Lepity, or just Lepity in game. Thank you so much for joining the Jedi Order. We're happy to have you. And then MLNTN, one of the co-creators of the Shift Stoned website, which we have some stuff brewing in there for you guys to hopefully show you in the future. So slight spoiler alert. There you go. Just anticipate, let that sit in for a little bit. 6-month sub there, so they got their Darth Maul lightsaber. And then of course, welcoming to the Jedi Order, Try and Kill Me. Thank you guys so much for your ongoing support of the show, as well as all you great supporters out there. We have people starting to hit those infamous Master Yoda badges, as well as Darth Vader badges, so you guys are great. Really do appreciate all the support, and just simply hanging out and chat and kicking it with us. It makes me a lot of fun. Feels like I'm just hanging out with my friends. But that's gonna do all our opening statements. So with that, Jed, are you ready for some pack one, pick one action, my friend?
Bring it on.
Excellent. So, this pack, I believe this pack is yours, correct?
That's right, I did.
Ooh, great. So we get to find out how far on point or how far off you were. So I'm actually going to go to you last then. So let's break down the pack for you guys really quickly. And then we'll start with Alex. So Alex, listen up. I'm coming to you first.
Which is a draft pack that changed this week.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Yes. Now that we're recording this, they did finally give us the mid-set update for the draft packs, and now they have changed up the design or the draft order. So now we're going to be drafting curated Echoes curated packs. So, and they added 73 cards to the pool, which we'll talk about a little bit later on the show. So just FYI, that's why this pack is going to sound a little different. So I am going to go a little bit slower, but I am going to go through the entire pack. First off, we have Roland's Favor. This is a slow spell for 2 Justice. You gain 2 armor. Draw a sigil, Justice Sigil from your deck. Combray Banner is Combray Influence, depleted unless you have a unit in play. Vara's Favor is the 2 Shadow slow spell. Lifesteal, deal 1 damage. Draw a Shadow Sigil from your deck. Storm of Feathers, 3 Justice at slow speed for stun to enemy units. Decimate, you gain 4 armor. Oasis Sanctuary, 3 time slow spell, you gain 5 health. Razor Wire Totemite, Exalted, quick draw 1/1 Totemite for 3 fire. Horn of Plenty is the relic for 5 time. Your units have +1/+1. Corrupted Umbran, 3/4 Radiant for 4 Shadow. Berserk, and Lifesteal. So John, what anything about these comments? Oh, I did it. I know I did it. My bad. Alex, going back to
I'm
you.
ready to go. Oh, okay.
No, I'll send it. I'll keep with it, Alex.
I did the same thing. I was like, go ahead, John. No, so for me, it'd be hard not to take the Horn of Plenty out of those commons. I mean, I like that Umbran a lot. But out of the commons, I think Horn of Plenty is the best card.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think I think Umbran is very strong, but Horn also is a little bit easier to play and kind of always beneficial. So I think it's a tough call, but I could see leaning one way or the other easily. Okay, going into our uncommons and rare, John. We have Feeding Time. This is a 4 Feln slow spell. Transform a unit into a pig, then kill it. Seat of Fury. By the way, a little small snippet. When I first started playing Eternal, I hadn't quite understood the fact that units stayed the way they were when they go to the void. So this card, I was totally like dumbfounded by it. I'm like, why do you care about turning something into a pig if you're gonna kill it anyways? Till finally, like, I played a game and realized things persisted through void. Anywho, Seat of Fury.
Good flavor though.
Yeah.
Either
legit.
way.
Yeah, legit. Seat of Fury, gain Skycrag Influence, depleted unless you have a sigil in your hand. Green Stretch Empath, 3/5 Druid for 5 Primal. Muster, so play a spell and attachment in the same turn. Draw 2 cards. We do have a rare. It's not very impressive, but we'll discuss it anyways. 3 Shadow gives you Waylay, the slow spell that the enemy player discards each copy of a unit or site of your choice from their deck. Decimate, steal the enemy player's void. So John, any of these uncommons are gonna unseat Horn of Plenty or Corrupted Umbran for you.
Yeah, I think Feeding Time does. And it's like, in my mind, it's like just a super version of Purify, which has just overperformed since Echoes of Eternity has come out. And so this, like, the silence and then kill it is so huge, I think, in this format. And I don't mind being in Feln or, Aurelian or any, there's a few ways you can go with that as a starting point. I don't mind splashing one of those colors, anything like that. So I'm not completely turned off by that as a first pick here or anything like that. And I think it easily takes it over Horn of Plenty. And Horn is a boosted card now, back up to 6 times. So like, I'm not even 100% that I would take it here out of the commons over like the Umbran, but I still might. But it is actually very close there. But for me, it's Feeding Time.
Okay.
Out of these uncommons, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think I'm also Feeding Time, just being unconditional removal, and that gets rid of any void shenanigans. It's not hard to splash 1 pip, like of one of those colors, if you're only in Primal or Shadow. And it's worth splashing, basically. So, yeah, I think I'm on Feeding Time.
Okay. So now, Moment of Truth, Jed. What break down this pack for us on your side of the board?
So it definitely came down to those Feeding Time, Umbran, or Horn for me. Was kind of leaning towards splashability and was coming off the mindset of relics mattering. And also, so I ended up going with Horn of Plenty. I do think Feeding Time is the strongest card and probably is the card I should have picked, just from a pack one, pick one standpoint. Um, but yeah, oddly enough, Horn of Plenty ended up being my first and my last pick in the entire draft. So I ended up with 4 of them after going through the draft, and so the horns were definitely a plenty throughout the entire draft.
So, so my first follow-up question is: you are noticing? I already know the answer. You are noticing the boosting of the Horn of Plenty.
Definitely.
Wow.
Yeah. I also ended up with a Temple Captain in that, and so it was just like I had all the Anthem effects, and it's like just very amusing how that draft turned out, as I think a lot of people were finding with their first drafts with this format.
How many of those horns made your final deck?
I ended up just with 3.
Okay.
I think, I think that, potentially going down to 2 may have been better, but it was, I had a bunch of humbug nests, and so it was just, trying to go wide and kill them in the air.
A solid strategy.
Yeah, well done, John. That was actually the question I was gonna ask too, because unlike like Wand and Tainted Mark, like this one kind of needs a little help to do some stuff. So it's interesting to find out how many is the correct number in a deck. So yeah, I definitely think playing 4 would have been too many. 2 is normally where I sit at. I could see 3 because you get 2 that almost that ups your chances of playing 2 of them in one game fairly high. And if Xene and Obelisk has taught us anything, that getting a +2/+2 to all your units is extremely powerful. So
yeah.
Okay. All right. Do you guys want to talk about the nerfs, buffs, and draft changes now, or at the end towards constructed corner?
I think we're gonna pull up all the changes later anyway, right?
Okay.
So why don't we just knock it out at the end?
Sweet. Okay. So with that's our pack one pick one. So we will go in right to our main topic. And once again, I kind of gave that little intro where we're going to help you or give you things that we can do or you can do to essentially make it to where you tilt less, and kind of get out of a slump. So with that being said, let's go ahead and pass it off to Jed, and you can crack this one open for us, buddy, since this is the topic you selected for today's show.
Sure. So I think that I definitely have personal experience, as probably many people who spend a lot of time playing card games that have both a combination of luck and skill before victory. And so, spent my fair share of being in a slump. And, basically just trying to think of ways to kind of break down why that happens is how I approach how to try to get out of a slump. And so I think that, the first thing that, I think everybody needs to recognize is that it happens to everybody, even probably the number one drafter, is going to go through tough times. And so, I think recognizing that it is something that can be improved upon and can be gotten out of, that it's just not the game hating on you, is probably a great starting point. And so I think, the main ways that I often think about it is looking at, what can you control for why you might be in a slump, what can't you control, and then, what might be a little bit of both.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think we've mentioned a couple times on the show, and you're right, any seasoned player has to understand that there's some things that are just going to have, there's chaos and randomness and a logical reasoning that's going to create an emotional response in you. And those are two different things, you know what I mean? Logic is logic, right? You're based off of facts, and then sometimes it's still going to trigger an emotion that you can't necessarily justify, but that is the way you feel. A good way to mitigate that is exactly how you mentioned, where figure out the solution and what you should worry about and what you shouldn't, and it will definitely mitigate some of the I guess, damage to your ego, so and so, or at least allow you to shift a little bit, because it's happened to everyone, right? You've had a deck, you're climbing ladder, you're feeling good, and then the next day you queue up that same deck, you're gonna finish off your climb, and then all of a sudden you go 1-7, and you're like, all right, I need to do a different format or something like that. And sometimes you have to identify where those losses are coming from and why before you just go full tilt.
And I think it's really hard to recognize that, especially when you're upset at the game or, how things are playing out. And so, I think recognizing that emotional piece is definitely kind of the first part for me, because I don't feel like it's harder to kind of look at your plays, look at how you've built a deck, look at things like that, um, if you're just upset at the game and kind of upset about what's happening. And so I think that's where kind of like taking a step back, and recognizing that this happens to everybody, for periods of time is just a great starting point, even though it might be an emotionally harder thing to acknowledge. So
Hey, that's what Discord's for, right? Everyone can just sit there and kind of woe in their miseries of slumps together, and it kind of makes it a little bit better. Like, hey, I'm not the only one that's getting smashed today. So with that being said, let's go ahead and break down some specifics. It's all right. I'm gonna leave it in, John, just to even out what happened earlier.
Cool.
What are some of the factors that you would consider in your control, Jed?
So I think that a lot of things that you highlight on your streams kind of go through the steps, as far as when you're going through the drafting process. Paying attention to how the deck is constructed as you draft it. Focusing on your curve, your unit count, identifying synergies, and then also trying to make sure that you're having appropriate fixing for your multi-faction deck that you're constructing, so that you don't end up being kind of losing games to the variance that's going to come up with your sigil and influence draws. So I think that deck construction, and then leading into kind of from the drafting process, as well as how you play out your games, are some of the ways that I think a lot of things are more in your control than people might realize. It helps manage the variance and some of the things that are out of your control.
Okay, and then so what are, I guess, so when you're doing this, are you just are you asking other people to like evaluate what you got going on? Are you just kind of hoping to identify this on your own, or like, because it's not easy for some people, right? Some people can look at things and they're like, no, my deck is great, I'm awesome, I'm smashing, and then they're like, I don't understand why I just keep getting influence starved or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, part of this is kind of trying to see, if you're in a patch that is kind of a bad run and a slump. I think recognizing that and seeking out help, and that's where I think things like the Discord, the main Eternal Discord, the Farming Eternal Discord, the EternalJourney Discord, as far as limited focus stuff, that to be able to ask those questions. Hey, kind of, can somebody walk me through a draft? Can somebody kind of go over this pick with me? Can someone go over this deck with me? To see kind of like how might someone else approach that, to be able to then kind of learn from those people that might have more experience, or feel more confident about what they're saying, at least, to be able to kind of say, this is how I might build it, even though, there might be a lot of different ways to approach it. And so I think that kind of helps hint at certain things. And I mean, for me, I got a lot of my foundation, honestly, for limited, from Magic the Gathering, listening to limited resources. So even other kind of collectible card game, resources like articles about, Limited and deck construction and Magic the Gathering have kind of helped build somewhat of a foundation for me, but that didn't always translate into kind of how to do that correctly in Eternal. When I started playing Eternal much more than Magic, and I got a lot of help from the guys in the Farming Eternal Discord, Padamaru, Bingrasher, when I first joined that Discord, and kind of like basically weren't afraid to say, you know what, I wouldn't do it that way. I think that's going to turn out really poorly for you. And so, I think it takes a little bit of humility to kind of step in and say, oh yeah, I mean, I do have a lot to learn. And I don't know, it's helped me improve, but clearly there's times where I probably don't make the optimal picks still. And so, or try to cut, clear bombs from my deck, and Padamara has to give me grief about it. So, it's there's always a learning curve in that regard.
It's one of the cool things about streaming sometimes, right? When you're doing drafts and no one's watching, you kind of can slack on things that you know are better, versus like I've had to do it as well, and Cass is huge about doing this as well. I haven't been able to catch enough Caleb stream to see if he does this consistently, but it's one of those things where you want to take a card, but you're streaming. So, and card A is the card you want, but card B is the adult pick. So it's kind of like, all right, guys, look, you should 100% take card A, but, and then, you can come up with any streamer excuse, but I want to be entertaining for you guys. So we're going to take card B, or like, for example, using me, for example, there's plenty of times where Sunset Priest was the correct card to take, and I cannot personally stand that card. So, chat is just like, oh yeah, it's Sunset Priest. You need a 3/3 for 3. It's perfect. And I'm like, no. And they're like, but why though? And I'm like, yeah, no, I'm throwing out my opinion. And so, yeah, sometimes you do need that check, someone to be like, hey, bro, yeah, that one card is really good, but you really do need a 2-drop, or you kind of need that fixing. And so that's really where I think you're able to kind of min-max your efforts and your skill sets there, and it's pushing against, it's kind of drafting the hard way, pushing against those instincts or whatnot. Another thing, so here also we see things that are out of control of your opponent's deck. So I do want to touch on that a little bit. John, we're going to go to you first a little bit on the constructed side, and then Alex, I'll send it over to you for a more limited focus. But, it's really easy to just be like, yeah, my opponent just had it all, like XYZ, blah, 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 and chalk it off. And then there's times to identify that, hey, this is a bad matchup for me, or my opponent's deck was very good. And there's a fine line there, right? You always, like, that should be your last resort of being like, no, my opponent's deck was busted. Because you're just kind of copping out on any errors on your side of the board. And, sometimes it's really important to note that, because that's what's going to help you in the matchup in the future. If you're like, hey, I killed this unit here thinking it was a problem, but it really wasn't. So now I know in the future not to do that again, versus just being, oh yeah, my opponent's, whatever. So on the constructed side, John, focusing on things that are like bad matchups, how exactly do you identify or distinguish the difference between those kind of scenarios?
Well, matchups, tend to be related to our current meta game. And so, like, if you want to have like a consistently winning strategy, you're going to want to consider that metagame in your deck building and all that, right? And so, going into the ladder at whatever level you should have some idea about what to expect. Now, I mean, people are always going to have some out there things show up every once in a while, and you can learn from those as well. But those are like that's just kind of the nature of a card game. In order for it to be balanced, like, there has to be all of this
rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jedi. Exactly. There has to be this rock, paper, scissors to just kind of the whole thing, right? And so there's going to be some matchups which are just very much in your opponent's favor just before you draw that first card, just because of the design of the game overall. And so knowing which matchups those are, and that can help you either tune your deck to shore up those matchups, or if you're like so into your own strategy that you're okay being weak to this one particular matchup, well, it'll help you not get emotional when you do just get completely crushed by that sort of strategy or that deck or anything like that, because you just are resolved ahead of time with your deck choice that you're okay with that happening. And the times where you do win that matchup are going to be it's just a high variance in your favor, where maybe your opponent's draw was terrible or whatever. And so, like, there's always going to be matchups like that in just generally, and there's going to be matchups which could go either way on any, just depending on literally every single draw that game mattering. There can be matchups that are just that close. And so I think it's, that's just one thing to consider. Whether, if you're finding yourself in a big slump, well, maybe you're running into more of this counter strategy and really need to either, Eternal's funny this way, like literally come back at another time and you might run into a completely different meta. It's funny like that, even at the same level. 2 days later, like strategies come and go in this game and are in favor and out of favor in waves that I can't exactly explain, but it happens very, very quickly.
Yeah, well put, man. Well put. Okay, flipping it over to limited, Alex. You have a good deck, you're doing a good run, and then you go up against an opponent and you just get smashed, right? They had the right draws, they had it all. How do you distinguish the difference between the opponent having a really solid deck, period? Because it happens sometimes, right? The things just line up, their legendaries line up with the factions they're drafting, or they picked up all the clean efficient removal, etc., etc. What techniques do you use yourself to identify the difference, whether it was something play error or on your end versus the opponent just having a busted deck?
Well, it's like pretty apparent a lot of times, right? When it happens that you like did a misplay or that you had an impact on the game in a negative way that's like now causing you to lose. Like when John mentioned strategy just now in Constructed, it's like, say you have like a busted control deck, right? And you're 6-0 or whatever. You're going into that final game feeling good, and then you just get like rolled over by a aggro deck or something, and it's like, okay, I had a busted control deck, but it's like not designed to take out a really quick low to the ground aggro deck. So it's like, the matchup, it's like Eternal's pretty brutal in the sense that it's one game against one person, and then you can lose 3 really quick, and you could have done everything right in those games. So it's kind of like going off topic from the question that you asked, but it's like for me, it's like let go of the result. Like if you did everything right, or at least you think you did, it's not, what happens at the end is not something that's in your control. Like you can make the right moves, and then your opponent could just one up you. That's the nature of a card game. And then sometimes, like I said, it's your misplay. Like you forgot to ace space on the turn before. You would have had lethal this turn, and basically after a game, stopping, I think I mentioned this before, and like reflecting on that game can help you determine if it was like variance or if you actually had an impact on it. It tends to jump out at me kind of right when you do it. You're like, oh, I missed lethal. That's the game, and then you're dead the next turn usually. But yeah, so it's like you identify things. The more you play, it kind of just it clicks with you easier, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense.
I like how you identified that you're like, I'm probably answering this in a completely different light than what you asked, but I'm going to do it anyways. That's why I'm on this podcast. Thanks, Alex. It's actually kind of funny though, because I straight up missed lethal today. I was recording a draft video for YouTube, and I identify my mistakes a half second after I let go of the mouse button. Like it never fails. It's always like, why couldn't I have done it half a second sooner? I casted the Shadow Pack Conjuring on a unit that had quick draw to finish off their unit, and then I was like, wait, Oh, that was enough to kill them off of the unblockable unit. I was like, awesome. I mean, I killed them next turn, so I got lucky, but it got pretty dicey. I didn't think I was gonna make it. So, yeah, sometimes that does happen. One last thing we want to talk about that I've always been a big proponent of on the show. I know it's not the easiest thing for people, but unlucky mulligans and power issues, I think, are two things that you have to 100% identify that is out of your control, and let those go. Like, there's no point in spending emotional energy and letting those ruin your yeah, it stinks when they lead you to your third loss in your draft, but you have to understand that that was almost 100% out of your control. And it just sometimes it happens that way, right? You're in top deck mode against your opponent. You really need to see some kind of gas. Your opponent top decks 3 units and you top deck 4 power. Like, there's nothing you could have done there, right? Maybe scout to the bottom or something. Mulligans, I say it's almost out of your control because it is still your decision. I typically don't get mad at myself when I lose when I keep a 2 power hand, because that was my own doing. Especially when I feel like it's a viable 2 power hand. If I'm keeping like 2 2 drops and 2 3 drops, so I just need 8 power to make this hand works, and you don't get there, like, it is what it is. But if it's 1 power and then 6 power and then you have to model 6 and you lose, well, I mean, you did what you could. So it's definitely very important to cut those, I feel like, out, because it's just wasted emotional energy. Getting mad about a bad mulligan, there's no way to improve that, right? You could just sit there and do a bunch of practice test hands, but the shuffler still could give you random stuff. So
It's like, I mean, the power issue is something that you shouldn't get upset about, but maybe you should evaluate: are you putting enough power in your deck, or are you putting too much power in your deck? Like, maybe that's something you would need to look at, So
or maybe
your decisions can affect the power in the game, basically, when you build the deck.
or maybe a Wretched Raven just milled all the power that you're missing.
Well, that's something that's out of your control, as you said. It could have milled the power to the top of the deck that you needed. So
I know, I'm just tilting, that's all.
no, I know you can. Those cards always mill Jedi's best cards, like the one answer he needs for the card that's killing him.
Yeah.
It always gets you that way.
And I'm not exaggerating. You guys have seen it on stream. It literally happens every time. I'm like, oh, we're good. We have a bring down and we have a death strike in our death strike in our hand. Mill. Oh, look, there goes the second shadow source for the death strike. Mill. Oh, look, there goes the bring down. Awesome.
That happens to me when you're spectating my games too.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, though, is at least Wretched Raven, I'll play a Wretched Raven. I will not play a Sunset Priest. I'm good. Okay, so
you'll join the dark side for the flying version.
Mm-hmm. Hey, at least it blocks good and it does the strategy. But
okay.
All right, so there we go. We've talked about the reasons for slumps, and we have talked a little bit about getting out of a slump. But we're gonna, mainly looking at additional resources, talking to people on Discords, maybe having your friends spectate and things like that. We mentioned screenshotting things to maybe identify a possible what you think the cause was. Obviously, that's a little bit harder to do if you're not actively trying to do that mid-game. Sometimes it escapes. I know it's happened to me a couple times where I'm like, oh man, this is a great what's the play, as I'm like contemplating it, and then I forget to screenshot it. But Jed, sending it back to you, what are some of the ways we can try to fix the cause of said slumps?
I definitely think that, looking at, getting that advice about deck construction, play patterns, and things like that. I think that if the cause is kind of your emotions, like you're not really kind of like thinking clearly, and that is contributing to things, I've often found it helpful to just take a break. I will switch to sealed games, Gauntlet, or just kind of poke around in constructed, just to kind of lower the stakes. I think that when you invest your 5,000 gold into a draft run and it doesn't go well, and now you're kind of having to grind your way back up to play again, it can be hard to get the reps to get that kind of feeling of experience. And so I think that, I don't know, for me personally, like I always feel tense when I'm playing my draft games. And so it's something that, if I'm not relaxed and feeling like I'm enjoying myself doing it, because, bottom line for this game, it's supposed to be fun. Switching to something that is a little less stressful, even if it's not eternal, has always been helpful for me. So
Yeah, I've been known to queue up a forge occasionally just to get my limited fix, but play it at my own pace and outsmart the AI essentially from time to time. It doesn't happen as often as well, I guess, I mean, I already admitted to it, so whatever. But yeah, it's something to do for sure. I mean, sometimes I'm not feeling constructed or whatnot. Another thing that you might want to consider, it's a little bit of pulling back the curtain here on the Eternal Journey crew, but there have been plenty of times where the three of us have drafted together on Discord, and honestly, we're just acting the fools. Like we, in a humorous way, making fun of our opponent, making fun of ourselves, just kind of overreacting to things, both in positive and negative light, and just kind of taking a lighter approach to our games has made it to where sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but we end up having fun either way, and it kind of lessens the blow a little bit. So that's something to consider as well. Just kind of, I for one am very hard on myself, especially in the competitive environment, or when I'm recording a video. I want to make sure that I'm making, playing optimally so it's the most educational for people, even though I'm sure they still learn from my mistakes as well. But sometimes you do have to lighten the load a little bit on yourself and take a step back, essentially. So, I don't know, John, do you have anything to add on that one?
No, I think those are great suggestions. I do those things as well. Like, I don't know. I think as I've gotten older, I've kind of been come around and been able to recognize that, like, yeah, I can get emotional sometimes. Like, I'm usually pretty level headed, but like I definitely can get upset. Even at a game, even when it's not competitive. Just when I'm trying to have fun. These things happen to me too, and yeah, like I think those are great pointers for managing it and trying to get out of it.
Ooh, actually, something that just came to mind that could help a lot of people as well is help someone else brew a deck. I think it's a good way to essentially kind of lower your investment into it, right? If it's not your deck, you're not trying to. Yeah, of course, you want to help your friend make a good deck and whatnot, but you're when you're play testing, whether it's in casual or ladder or against, one of your friends, the pressure isn't there. You understand that it's a deck that hasn't been tuned yet, so you're just testing. So if things don't work out, it's kind of okay. And when things do work out, then you could feel good about something. So that I could see that being another way. I know I enjoy deck doctoring with other people, and there's also something to be rewarded when you introduce a card that they didn't think about and ends up being a great addition, and you both can kind of enjoy the happiness of that. So that's something else to do. Alex, going back to a strictly limited player for the most part, I know you do try to get your pack for the day, but what's another way that you kind of take a break if you need to?
I just I'll play an entirely different game. I'll like Jed said, just take a step back. And you guys are talking about playing other stuff, but if I'm in a slump and kind of tilting on Eternal, then that's kind of like the last thing I want to do. So I'll give it a break, 24-hour break. You know, I'll play mindless games on my phone, basically to get it off, or play spades, play a different card game, and then go back to it when I feel a little more comfortable, like I'm gonna have fun. So that's what I tend to do, and then I commiserate a lot. I have a group. You guys have all heard me. It's good to have friends that talk you down from your tilting, and help you realize the reasons for the slump that you're in. And so it's good to have friends. Discord, just like real life. If you're having problems in real life, it's good to get it off your chest, and then you can go back to the game and hopefully enjoy it again.
I don't know what you're talking about, man. We always tell you your picks are whack.
It's all luck. It's all luck.
All right. So that's taking the break part. The last thing we do want to talk about is remember your sample size. It's much like that was stated earlier in the show. The fact that these are all best of one games makes it to you kind of forget, right? You feel like you play more games than you have, because of that, especially if you come from other card games where maybe the norm is best 2 out of 3. So it's very easy to feel like you're getting the bad end of the stick, or you have a longer bad stint than you actually do. The sample size is everything. And that's one of the frustrating things about the draft as well, is when you have a deck, you're trying out some cards, you think the deck's good or bad, or you're not sure, and then you go 1-3 and you just didn't really get enough experience with the deck. And so try playing more games. Playing more games increases the sample size, and then obviously, like with all kinds of research, the more data you have, the better of an analysis you can make. So potentially, if you lose 2 games in a row, you might feel like tilting because you lost 2 in a row. But if you played 10 games, you might win the next 8, and then those 2 don't feel as bad. Do you care to elaborate a little bit on this, Jed?
Yeah, one of the things that, I mean, I put together the community survey, and so clearly I'm somebody who's interested in collecting data. Um, I have been tracking my wins and my draft run kind of data for the last year. And it's just interesting reflecting back and looking at the periods of kind of like where I didn't do very well that month. And then the next month I did pretty good. And so I think seeing how that win rate kind of evens out over time really helps me, I think, check the times when I say, oh, yeah, this kind of a down week. It's a down month, but it's not going to stay like this because clearly it hasn't in the past. And so I think that's something that helps inform and kind of ground my emotions when it comes to kind of getting stuck in a slump. Um, just to know kind of like I've been there before, I've gotten out of it before. But some people starting out who are having a hard time kind of building, they're working on building a foundation, they're working on building that sample size. Um, it can be hard to see that kind of over that horizon. And so, I think that's where just kind of all of these kind of link back together for me in a lot of ways. And when it comes down to it, it's about having fun. And if the result is that you're having fun, even if you're not winning the games, then that might be kind of like that might be enough for people. So kind of having to look at what you want to get out of it as well.
Sweet. Excellent. Well,
03 runs for all the games were great. Great games. I just went down to the wire, but 03. And like you said, it tends to wash out. Like everything evens out in the wash as far as your winning percentage goes, as long as you're a consistent deck builder and stuff. So that's helped me a lot too. I'm like, oh, I'm just in a rough patch right now. It'll work itself out. And then you kind of break out of it with like, a 7-1 draft or something, like, okay, there you go. It like helps you build your confidence again. So good point there, my friend.
Especially when you're climbing the ladder in limited, I think it's so interesting because in constructed, I honestly believe that it's just playing games. If you play enough games with a deck that is anywhere above 50% win rate, you're going to get there. In limited, because you're constantly changing your drafts, and sometimes you draft a good deck, sometimes you don't, sometimes the matchups are different. You can sit there and go 3-3, 0-3, 4-3, and then you're down in the dumps, and then all of a sudden you do a 6-3 and a 7-1, and you just made it to Masters. And it's so definitely have to keep understand the bigger picture when it comes to limited, I feel. John, any closing statements from you?
No, like I say no, but actually yes. No, like you
Seems to be
you
a
guys have
trend on
really
this show.
you guys have really covered this topic pretty well, I think. Like you guys are all great examples of people I look to for motivation to help me not tilt and things like that. I think having a support system really helps a lot, and you guys are definitely that for me. So thank you for that.
Aw.
Yeah.
We are friends.
It's a very symbiotic relationship, my friend.
Sweet. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it. Jedthehomarid, thank you so much for deciding to bring up this topic on the show. It's something we wanted to do for a minute. I do think it's something that every player of Eternal definitely has at some point dealt with. If not, I don't think you have a big enough passion for the game, which, there's nothing wrong with that. But I find very few people really just kind of do this offhandedly. I really do feel like a lot of people that play this game really do enjoy it and they put a lot into it. So yeah, long story short, thanks, Jed. Really do appreciate you, friend.
Happy to come on the show.
Yep. So we're not done with you yet, though. We're going to use you for the whole show. You agreed to it, so you're stuck here for the whole marathon.
Perfect.
I say that and you just hear a click in Discord. Like, oh, well, I guess that's one way to do it. Okay. So guys, we led to it earlier today. This week, I believe, actually this is just the second day, we received the patch update, and we're going to blend this into Constructed Corner. I don't have a straight up deck for Constructed Corner, unless there's one you really want to talk about, Jed, just because there's a lot to digest here in these buffs and nerfs, and so I felt like that would be enough to kind of discuss that. We'll roll in both Constructed Corner and the draft update into one section today, because it's just a really big update. The majority of the nerfs were specifically towards Praxis and Destruction type decks, but they kind of bleed over a little bit. So I'll go over them very quickly, and then we can just kind of make some snippets on things that we do think are big or good, bad, ugly, all that good stuff. I do encourage you. I did post the in-depth conversation we had on Discord, or on stream on the YouTube. So I will link that down below if you do. I believe it was like an hour and a half conversation that we had going through the entire set of buffs, nerfs. I was about to say burfs. Nerfs, buffs, and the draft pack. So you can check that out once again here on the YouTube if that's where you're watching it. So without further ado, let's do the constructed part first, just because I'm going to do it in order of the article. So even-handed golem was a 2/2 and is now a 1/1, so it still draws you 2 cards if you have all even in your deck. Nahid's Distillation is constructed as well as limited. It was 6 times, it's now 7 times, so they upped it by 1 power, so it costs 7 to play it naturally and 5 to play it with the exhaust mechanic on it. Kato Arena Herald now requires 12 units in your void to make a giant, and it has Corrupted 2, and this is up from Corrupted 1, as well as only requiring 8 units to make an 8/8. Correction, I'm sorry, 10. 10, up from 10 to 12. Unfamiliar Interloper, here's another big limited all-star. It was a 2/1, and this one is now a 1/1. And let me just go ahead and say, playing it in this new draft format, that is a huge difference.
It was a 1/2, right?
Oh, what'd I say?
Yeah.
Did I say 2/1? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I apologize. Yes, it was a 1/2, and now it is a 1/1. A Rectifier. This one was a limited all-star from the minute it came out, and now it was recently creeping into constructed. It was 3 time for a 2/1, and is now 3 time for a 1/1. And this one a little bit. I'm not sure if this was a huge nerf or not. It is in the splash category. You definitely want to make sure you are primarily timed for it. But the one... I'm trying to figure out if the 1/1 versus the 2/1 is a big change. I feel like it is, but it could be just because I haven't, we're used to it to trade off with more things. But we'll see. Aramot's Machinations was a 5 time shadow slow spell. Now it's a 6 time shadow. So they up the influence and up the cost of it. But now it does work with even-handed golem. Blazing...
Void bound.
Say again?
Wish it has void bound.
Oh yeah, sorry. Even-handed golem decks. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know what you meant. I'm just trolling.
No. No. It's a good clarification for sure. No, that was something that needed to be said. I presented that incorrectly. So thanks for keeping me honest, John. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Mute. Okay. Blazing Salvo. This is. We still played it in limited. I like it in limited because you can find easy 2-drops to put in there. But this is more of a constructed card. It was the standard for any fire deck. Now deals 2 damage to a unit and yourself. That's right. Not only gives you 2 damage to the unit, but it's going to smack you in the face while you're doing it as well. That's the difference there, instead of it just being a modified char. And then finally, Arc of Soul. It was a 1-time and got nerfed to 2-time now. And then I guess the rest of the stuff we can talk about after. So nerfs. Anyone? Jed, let's start with you since you're our guest. Do you have any big hot takes on any of these?
Well, I think primarily from a limited standpoint, like the rectifier nerf really feels like it hits time. I mean, time still has some pretty good commons with Magnificent Stranger and Humbug Nest, but rectifier was just a solid card that took care of a lot of things, answered kind of late, difficult to deal with threats, gummed up the ground early, and, you weren't afraid to pick one up early, weren't afraid to pick one up late just to splash it. I think the fact that it doesn't do as much early just seems like it's less flexible now. Kozul Diplomat, 2 Justice 1/1 that silences a creature when it comes into play. It was not an exciting card, and while Rectifier gets to potentially do it twice, it's like that extra point of toughness really seems like it's gonna hold it back.
Yeah, you're definitely not picking up every single one of them now if you're not in time. And then the fact that you can silence their 3-drop and it might not necessarily trade with their 2-drop is a pretty big deal. Yeah. Going to Interloper once again, I've noticed it. Maybe it's just because I drafted it. Like the fixing influence is still there, but when you're used to getting 2 chump blocks out of it, now you're only guaranteed 1 chump block. I think is a pretty decent change to the Interloper, and obviously it's not just a free attack anymore into a bunch of 1/1s and stuff like that. Alex, any of these stand out to you from a limited perspective?
I'm sad about Nahid's Distillation because I think it was like a perfectly designed limited card, and then constructed players had to break it for us. So like I'm sad about that one. And then the Interloper not chumping twice for me is like minor. Like for me it's more about the fixing with that guy, so it's like not really a big impact, I think. I mean, you're right, you can't chump twice, but as far as fixing, it's the same. And then the rectifier is not, I've splashed rectifiers before in like a Feln deck, and like it's not something you could do anymore. So I'm sad about that one too.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree with you more when it comes to Nahid's Distillation. I said that on the stream where some of these cards, were great. Yeah, I think Nahid's Distillation was it was well designed for limited, I thought. And don't get me wrong, you're still gonna play it. Like drawing 3 cards for 5 is still really reasonable in a limited deck. You won't squeeze it in there as early as you normally do, but there's still gonna be spots for it. But I agree, I do not think that nerf came at all from what it was seeing in limited, which is a little frustrating. But once again, we've talked about it before. I think granted the information that was put out from the misplays evaluation, I think it had 30% or 25% of Eternal players drafted. So it's who of them to cater to the majority, but it's still a little frustrating. Our draft packs are dictated by Expedition, and now some of our cards are getting nerfed because of Constructed. It's like, come on, throw us a bone here. John, do you have anything?
Yeah, you guys said a lot of what I was thinking already. Like one of the cooler things that Rectifier used to do was like attack for 2 for free over multiple turns, right? Where they would just like not want to trade to not get their flyer or whatever silenced. And so like you could just kind of chip in there for 2 every turn, and now that's just 1, that part of it is quite a bit worse.
Ooh, very good point.
Right, like just kind of the free rectifier chip damage over the course of a game. So like that also makes it quite a bit worse now for limited, I think. Like it was never, I don't think it was ever a chump blocker really, right? It was always just like a when do you kill it so you can get that second silence kind of thing. I still think it's good. It's a little harder to play. It's definitely not as splashable now. But yeah, like it's worse overall because of that attack power nerf for sure. Because that little guy could actually attack quite a bit into a lot of clogged up boards. One you guys didn't mention, I thought is a big deal for limited was Airmott's Machination. That was another one where like you would just basically look to splash that in any limited deck where you were one of those colors at least, right? Now that it's 2 shadow, it's a lot less splashable, and the fact that it costs 6 now makes the value proposition a lot weaker as well. Before you were happy paying 5 and getting some upgraded stats on maybe 2 of the 3 units. Maybe you don't even have 1-drops in your deck. Now it's just the whole thing is just looking a lot less enticing. So I think that's a big hit to machinations for limited too.
Yeah, I didn't think about the fact that they went up. The influence didn't bother me too much because most of the time you wanted to have some kind of a base Xena deck or at least base time or base shadow. So the double splash is a little rough, but it's also a 6 cost, so you have time to get there. But you're right. Now the return on investment the ratio is significantly less because most limited decks don't have a 1-drop. And so you're paying 6 to get 5 power worth of stats plus a little bit. Obviously the +1/+1 overwhelm. So that is a very interesting point. Good point, John.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some buffs, and we'll start. Some of these do cater to limited, so we'll go ahead and go through all of them again. And then we'll start with you, John, see if any of them stand out to you. We have Purge Driver. It was a 2/2 for 4 Justice. Now it is a 3/2 for 4 Triple Justice. And I swear I'm the only person that has gotten Purge Driver to not kill one of my units, but 2 of them so far. I really do feel like I have the only confirmed kills from Purge Driver. And I was the victim of that, by the way. It was on my opponent's side. They killed my unit, just FYI. Two-Face was a 2/2 corrupted 2 and is now a 2/1 corrupted 1. That one personally I think is a huge one, and I think that's a nerf versus a buff, or a side buff as they're calling it. Buffs. Kira the Prodigy, Yodabyte's created card, was a 2/2. It is now a 2/3. Heirloom Blade was a 3/3 weapon, now is a 4/4 relic weapon, and is now a 4/4 relic weapon. Aerial Battle was slow and deals 5. This one I think is huge. Is now fast and deals 7. Staff of Stories was an 0/4 relic weapon that drew your card at the start of your turn, and now is an 0/5 weapon. Statuary Maiden, good old school card of mine that I'm a favorite, is back to her original glory and is now a 2/4 again. And Midnight Gale was a 4/3 and is now a 4/4. All right, John, have at it, buddy.
Yeah, so what do you want? Limited perspective on these?
Whatever card you want to talk about is fine. We're comboing the 2 off, so
Sure. Okay. Just pick one, I guess. Yeah, I mean, you already kind of mentioned it. Yeah, like Two-Face, I think calling that a buff is a little disingenuous because no one is using this card as a mill card, which is the only way you could say that this card was buffed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They made the corrupted 1 instead of 2, and the corrupted on Two-Face mills for 2, right?
Correct.
I guess it is like in cases where your goal is just sacrificing things, like for example in limited, I guess maybe you're in like a Waystone deck or something like that, then I guess it also is a buff. But no, most of the time this is a huge nerf to this card. Like I think in a lot of cases you were just using it as a deadly way to come up the board, and then you would get a free chump blocker. It's basically the same nerf that they did to Interloper, right? Like that changing the health from 2 to 1 makes it to where you can only block the 1 time now. So I think that's a huge nerf to this card in limited as well as constructed.
Oh yeah, like we're seeing Condemn and Favor come back, right? And Blight Moth. So that's 3 cards now that can easily kill this deadly unit that you wanted to gum up the board. So
yeah, the fact that it starts as a 2/1 to begin with also makes it just quite a bit worse. So
Yep.
Yeah, this was a very high pick, uncommon for me until this change. So side buff, I don't know about that.
Jed, any of these cards caught your fancy?
Well, I'm intrigued by this, what seems like a sneaky unnerfing of statuary. Like that was when I kind of early on when I was getting into paying attention to the constructed meta. Like this was a card that would ruin my game plans for my decks, and like I just remember, it seemed like people were quite disappointed when it went away, and that seeing Torch is slow, which was supposedly going to be kind of like removing it from the meta, and now it's back to a 2/4, and it just kind of ruins the game plan for a lot of the sacrifice and recursion decks. I don't know. It's interesting that I don't feel like I've seen or heard a whole lot about it just yet, but granted, these just happened a couple days ago, so I'm curious to see where this goes and where either Winchest or Stone Scar kind of uses this.
I think the issue with Statuary Maiden, at least because I like the card and I ran Ambition a lot, is that it's a very feel bad card, right? Because you get rewarded for doing what your deck wants to do anyways, and so your opponent's just like, okay, not only are they killing my units, but now I can't get them from the void because they're turning them into cudgels and they're drawing a card. Is just like, oh my god. And so, and that's also during the era where there was Zhou, so you can use the cudgels to market juggle and things like that. It's a very feel bad card, but I think there's plenty of answers in the format for it, and it's broken, but when it feels broken, it's hard to say your opponent wasn't going to already win that game, because then that means they have answers, so it is interesting, though. I think I'm glad to see it back personally, but that's me. I'm all about buffing everything to a power level versus nerfing cards to even things out. So that's me. Alex, you have anything to add before we go into the draft update?
I mean, they should have never ruined her maidenly glory. I mean, I was going to say the same thing. Like, back to her awesomeness. I always loved that card. So yeah, find ways to deal with it. That nerf annoyed me when it happened, and I'm glad she's back.
Sweet. Yeah, actually, there's more cards to deal with her now because we have the contract suffocates kind of back in rotation now, thanks to things like Tokas and whatnot. So yeah, no.
Yeah, Turn to Sea. There's plenty of ways to deal with her.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so moving into the draft update. I will go through all the cards that were added to the draft format, and it is 73 cards. We're not going to go over the adjusted weighted. Like, I feel like that's a little too much detail, so you guys will see it in your draft. But I will go through the cards, and you guys can just kind of holler if there's something you want to say specifically about it. Sound good? I don't want to spend too much time in this section. So right off the bat, one that I've already drafted, and I am personally not like super high. I don't think this is a windmill slam, but I do like this card. It's kind of like less great Hammerhand, or who was it? I think it might have been its tens or collector said it was half a Hammerhand. But anywho, Magmatic Sentinel. This is a 5/7 Sentinel for 8 fire. Summon. Deal 5 damage to an enemy unit. So it doesn't go face, but 5 damage kills a lot of things. And we've already established, at least in the previous format, it was slow enough to go to 7. We'll find out how slow this current format is, but I don't think, even though the jump from 7 power to 8 is quite huge, the fact that you're typically going to get a decent sized unit off of this when it enters the battlefield kind of makes it worth it in my eyes. I don't think, once again, I'm windmill slamming here running 3 of these, but I don't hate having 1 of these. High Alert. Anyone high on High Alert right now? You guys think this is going to be a big impact, or... Yeah, right? Like, it's just clearly worse than all the Conjurings.
No. Sorry, stoner humor.
Dive Bomb is in the format too, so like the 4-drop kind of fast spell slot seems pretty overcrowded.
Finest Hour, like,
that's a boosted combat trick though, so I mean,
oh yeah, I'm seeing a ton of them already.
That's something.
Yep. Arrow Spotter I think is bad. Like, there's not enough. They've added some spells, so Renown's a little bit easier to target, but we're still living in a world with a bunch of 1/3s and 1/4s and 1/1 flyers. So yeah, any 1x flyer is just asking for a beating. Yeah, like there's so many better 3 damage weapons in the format right now. I don't think this is gonna be a big hitter. Um, Long story short, actually, just to sum this up, it I will say this because Swool Beastmaster is back in the format, so that is the honor 5/5 for 5, overwhelm, renown, pay a 2/2 flying squirrel. So I'm super excited to be drafting my old friend again. I know you are as well, John.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like they're going back to the original tri-faction combinations. The strangers are no longer weighted, so you are going to have to value fixing a little bit higher. But yeah, they're using the synergies. Granted, much like how we talked about on the show, you're more than welcome to draft these factions in the previous format. I easily can see you being able to draft the I don't know, the Echoes of Eternity tri-factions in this format. It might have slightly under-supported combinations, but it's still viable. Were there any cards to Jed? Were there any cards that they added that stood out to you that you'd like to talk about? Other than the displays? Yeah, displays are back, guys, and they're awesome. They're way better. If you haven't played with them, they're way better than the ones we were playing with. Promise.
I'm looking forward to Lithrai Lobotomy and sacrificing a Waystone Gate to kill something in 8/8, or a Bottled Storm to just draw 2 cards. So I think that I never got to live the dream of what is it, the Flying Greed
Yeah, Consuming Greed
thing,
Yeah.
Consuming Greed. But just seeing some more good options for like sacrificing those high value relics is enticing to me.
That is really interesting that they added that to the format. Wow.
It's like Combust was
I-
already there, but now it's just like
well, like
huge
Greed
payoff.
already. You see, like I was like, they added Greed last time, and then like this time Lobotomy seems really good right now. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool.
That's funny you mentioned that because that's exactly one of my losses to the draft video I did today. It was they played a 2/2 and I was like, oh, I'm good, and they played a Waystone Gate. I was like, okay, I could race that. I could totally race that. And then turn 4 they played Consuming Greed, and I was like, yeah, I can no longer race that. They have a 2/1 flyer, a 6/4 on the ground, and an 8/8 on the ground. I'm like, yeah, about that.
Lobotomy 6x boosted, so that combo might show up a fair amount.
The only good thing is that I think everyone as a whole identifies the power level of Waystone Gate, so hopefully we'll be seeing less of those combinations just because they're going to be harder to come by. But you know, who knows?
Yeah, there's still what's the Platinum Kieran? What's the relic that thing makes? Like there's that, and then there's like the
Eternity Core.
Eternity Core. There's like the Sacred Nacho Moth in the format as well. You know, there's those like incidental relics that you play when you have these cards too. Like there's kind of both sides of that in the format now. So I think that's going to be a pretty dang good card.
They added Spellunker as well.
Yeah, that's right. That was in the update too. Yeah.
Alex, what about you, buddy?
I mean, the Horn of Plenty being ×6 is kind of...
Yeah, that's huge. It was ×6 in the original Echoes format too, right?
Was it? I don't like.
It was. I can't remember. I know it was boosted. Maybe it was just 3 times boosted.
3, but 6 really makes a difference.
Like it's been at no boost for this last format that we've had for the last few weeks, and so like I just haven't been seeing them. Like Horn's such a good card. Yeah, that's another one, and that's like just so splashable. Like that should be you should be seeing quite a lot of Horns showing up in people's decks, I think.
And yeah, it goes good with the relic synergies. So, I mean, yeah, those are going to be going. People are going to have those in their decks for sure.
Yep. A couple other ones that stand out for me. Auric Reclaimer is in. Going back to the traditional. Well, I can't say traditional because tradition is a faction. The Ambition tri-faction with Armory. It gets you can shift it for 6 to get a weapon back that's a copy of the weapon that was in your void. It's only the stats of it, so it doesn't, like, for example, it won't double if you copy a Edge of Prophecy, or it won't copy a or it won't double, or it won't have the effect of Hook Sword, but it is another way to essentially get you a recursion, essentially, while still having a 2/3 body that blocks very well on curve. So not a bad card overall. Another highlight is Slay. This is just premium removal. 3 power at slow speed to just kill any unit in Argenport is absolutely phenomenal for limited. There's Unstable form, which is kind of mediocre, but when you take into consideration the corrupted units, they do maintain the cost of the actual unit. So for example, Corpse Boom, if they should kill your Corpse Boom, the Shade, the 06 Shade, the 07 Shade, is still a 7 cost, so you can upgrade it with Unstable form. And then finally, what was the other one that was on here?
That's pretty cheeky. I like that.
Yeah,
That
I think
is
it's pretty
spicy.
neat. And you know, when you're getting, there's very few 8 cost cards that you're not happy to have. I mean, granted, I'd say that, and you'll get like that legendary that's a 4/4 or something, 4/4 lifesteal, which still
You
isn't
would.
horrible.
This is reminding me of the peasant testing. I was unstable form testing like crazy, so
Oh yeah,
recently familiar with that.
yeah. Just to highlight, guys, we are. I don't have a date locked in yet, but just stay on the lookout on the Discord for the information. We are going to be doing another peasant tournament hosted by EternalJourney, so keep on the lookout for that. The last card I wanted to talk about is Power Breach Sentinel. It doesn't tussle as well with some of the bigger cards in the format, but this card is an absolute powerhouse because it does clean up your draws by drawing playing the top power of your deck depleted. So it does a similar thing where it's taking power that you probably no longer need now that you have 6 to auto your deck, so you can draw nothing but gas, but it also facilitates the fact that you can play 2 cards in a turn or your bigger spells with it. So just keep that in mind. But all right.
Just what time needed another powerhouse card. Beach Boy has always been a draft all-star.
Yeah, that card is very solid.
Real quick note on the fixing strangers have just been dropped to regular weight.
Yeah.
Yes.
So those guys a lot of times are your sacrificial triggers, you know, on your stranger strategy. So you're not going to have as many of those to go around, and then it really does put a hamper on the fixing as well. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, I'm already seeing a lot more 2 faction decks. Maybe 2 faction with the lightest 3rd color splash, but it's like, as far as winning decks I'm seeing after this update, it's already like a trend that I'm feeling like is a thing. So tighter faction decks being played now.
Yeah, it's a good thing to take note of.
So this week's What's the Play is quite an interesting one. I don't know why I do this to myself. I'm sorry for those of you that are listening. Try your best. Treat it like a memory game. Okay. Our opponent is, they are Destruction. So Fire, Time, Shadow with a splash into Primal. They have 9 power. We're at 7 power, and we are straight up Honor. So Fire, Justice, Primal. Our opponent's at 17 life. We're at 15. The board state. Oh boy. Okay. Excuse me. Our opponent has the 2/2 Gardener. I forgot what it is. The one that gains your life. Herbalist. There you go. I was close. I knew I had something to do with this. Herbalist. Yeah. I just saw this card like 3 times. I don't know why. I've told you I'm bad with names. A Berserked Skycrag Stranger. The 8/8 Giant. A 5/4 Fear Tracker, and then a flying quick draw 5/3 Horse Snatcher Bat. Our side of the board is the 2/4 Skycrag Berserker Stranger. Go tutor up a dragon. I don't know the name of it. It's fine.
Strange Tracker.
Oh, it's Tracker. That makes sense. He's looking at the ground in the picture. All right, Strange Tracker. The 2/2 Blade Crafter. A 3/4 Exalted Mastery 6 Mithril Paladin, a 4/2 flying Thunder Winged Dragon thing.
Okay, I don't actually know what the name of the Thunder Wings Dragon is.
Yeah, I know. It's probably just Dragon. That'd be funny if it's just Dragon, 4/2 Dragon. The 2/2 Oni Grunt, And then a 4/5 Draconis. Okay, no, it is flying. For some reason I thought maybe it might have been silenced, but I would have seen the X, so never mind. In our hand, we have another Skyhorror Draconis. We have a Water Conjuring. We have a Soldering Smithing with a Shugo's Hook Sword in the Void, a Fighting Winds, and an Avagraft. It is our turn. We have no power to play. So let's start this debacle off with you, Jed, since you're our guest. Congrats. What do you want to do?
So I think, at least for me, I'm noticing that with the opponent only having one available power, I can't think of anything that would mess up with what we'd want to do, at least. So, and I think I'm kind of just focusing on the flyers because the ground's pretty much blocked, and you've got 8 power worth of flyers. Just technically a 3-turn clock if they can get in. So I think what I would do would be to use the Water Conjuring to stun the Horse Snatcher Bat, and probably the 8/8. So that the 4/2 flyer and the 4/5 flyer can get in. That would give you potentially two attacks to be able to get a permafrost on something. And then you could, if you don't decimate the Water Conjuring, you could buy back your Shugo's Hook Sword to take out something else that they might play that would get in the way of the flyers. Because anything they might attack with on the back, I mean, you could just trade. I mean, the Fear Tracker might throw a wrench in the damage clock. If they're able to sacrifice that, but even if they do, it's still like a 3-turn clock, and depending on how things shake out, you might be able to even squeak in some additional A-space damage.
Gotcha. So yeah, your play would be pre-combat conjuring the 8/8, the 5/3, swing in with your flyers, and then Soldering Smithing back the Hook Sword for potentially using it the following turn. Yeah, seems solid. John, I think we went to Alex first last week. So John, what's your play here?
Yeah, honestly, I thought of a line without realizing, like, to me, in the screenshot, it looked like the Mastery had already procced on the Draconis there, but it's very subtly showing that it has not, I guess.
Yeah, correct. It hasn't been. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it had already been used until Jed mentioned it. I'm not sure if that changes my mind. It's like, what I was thinking was basically, we're like Jed said, we're kind of free to do what we want here because the opponent's basically tapped their resources down here. Assuming there was no mag strange or cost reduction shenanigans earlier in the game, which I can't tell. So I do like getting in there in the air. It's interesting that the line that Jed took with the proactive stun here. I think because I have the Draconis in hand, and I like having instant speed options here that we have. I kind of like just swinging in my 4/2 and my 4/5 into the bat to see whether or not they trade with one of those. I imagine they probably will just trade it with the Draconis because of the threat of a stun next turn. So that would just kind of take out this flyer in that case. And like either way, right? Like it just kind of, I like the way, I don't mind trading either of those there with the backup plan. If they do trade, I think I might just play out another Draconis. If they just take the damage, then I think I Soul Drain up the Hook Sword and just hold up both the Biting Winds and the Conjuring. I I don't know, like there's so much going on in this screenshot that like I could kind of keep going on a few tangents here.
I know,
What do you think?
that's why I was super happy about it. Just to carry on a little bit further on your decision, would there have been any kind of consideration for just swinging in with the 4/2 dragon and see if they block that or take the 4? Or do you think that's
Not
not
really,
okay?
because like your 4/5 still can't block. Like if they decide to take it and then crack back with their flyer, like you still can't. You know, it's not a great block. And then I'm like, well, it makes it like I don't think they would block that, and then it makes the decision of what I want to do kind of much harder. Like like I like the simplicity of just offering the trade and seeing what they do there. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's a very valid point. All right, Alex, what you got for us, buddy?
This is a really good what's to play, because like you said, there's a lot of different things.
Thank you.
And looking at this, what I would do, I would just go for it, right? So I'm gonna stun the 5/3 flyer and the 5/4, and then I'm gonna avigraph the 8/8, and then I'm gonna A space, and then and doing the 2/4, making him go twice. Depending on how he blocks, he would still be at 4, and then you could win the game next turn, basically, with one of your flyers, if he doesn't have an answer for both of them. That's like
I like that very aggressive line.
Yeah.
Granted, I've had like minutes and minutes and minutes to look at this. I don't know if I would have done that in the game, but I like that line a lot.
Yeah, I do too. The color that would punish that line the most is the one that they're not showing, right? Justice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If they
So
had
like some way to unstun
or kill your flyer.
Ensnare. Yeah.
Ensnare. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think
The
you're minimally punished by going that way.
They're they're pretty vulnerable this turn if you do that with just their 2/2/2 blockers, you know? And then they're going to be at low life because you have to take a lot of that, depending on how they block. So that might be a little too aggressive.
No.
You could always back it. I mean, you have an awesome hand, so it's like you
Yeah.
can back it up with another 4/5 flyer, with another hook sword. So it's like I don't mind going for it right there because you still have more stuff in your hand,
Yeah, and I should have just talked before you did because that's exactly what I did. Oh, you took the wind out of my sails. Thanks, bro.
Oh, that is what you did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that a lot.
So here's the thing. When they're tapped out, I'm a very conservative player, but when they're practically tapped out, that's the time to strike, right? And so and you have a decision. The only thing I will add to that is there is a decision. The autoplay is to hit the giant, right? Because it's the bigger unit. And there's also the consideration that the fear tracker can be activated to, drain you do the 6-point swap or 3-point swap. The thing is actually, I do take in consideration the tempo loss of those higher costed activations off the corrupted units. And so I did think about potentially avigrafting the 5/4 fear tracker, and because it was going to give him a block, right?
Exactly. That's why I ruled it out, because it gives him a blocker and it will keep him at more life.
But the flip side to that though is if they wanted to activate it the following turn, right, it would take the majority of their power to do, and we can continue to develop our board either with the hook sword or with the Skyhorror Draconis. So the power of our hand definitely made me choose. Another thing I considered as well is if we wanted to leave a blocker back because of the fact that they had a berserk unit on the board, and it's very easy for a berserk unit to get in a ton of damage, right? Just off the top of my head, granted, I understand this is a 2-card combo, but they could have touched it and then given rampage, so that's going to be 10 damage coming across that we weren't anticipating. But yeah, another consideration would have been to play the Skyhorror Draconis this turn, and either a combination of what John was saying, where you attack with both the flyers and see which one they block, and then you play the other Draconis, or just playing the Draconis and not attacking, and then that way you have 12 power in the air and you still have the stun in your hand. So that's another thing to consider. I think those were both viable lines, and I would have given them more thought should our opponent had any power up. But the fact that they didn't. The other thing is that I think no matter what you do on the ground, I think you swing with the Mithril Paladin, because if they just auto block it, right, you're still going to have the potential of throwing that +3/+4 to one of your flyers, which will outclass the flyer they have and make it less susceptible to things like biting winds or whatever fire-based removal they have. So I think that's something that you have to auto do. But yeah, I ultimately took the line that Alex said, which was Avagrafting the giant because it was the bigger threat. It didn't give them another body, and there's a chance they could make another giant somehow. And then stunned the 2 5-cost units, and then swung NIA spaced, forcing the blocks of both the units they left behind, putting them in a very bad spot. They would have taken a bunch of damage, and they have way less blockers to come up to essentially stop us from swinging it again. Jed, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, no, I think that I just have this cognitive, like this block on complex board states where I definitely try to simplify things, and I think that definitely leaves me open to kind of playing more conservatively. And so it's really interesting to hear that take, because it was not a line that I saw at all. But
sometimes we are on a timer, so there is some value there. There have been several times where I'm doing combat math. I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna do it. I'm just gonna swing, or like, all right, I'm just gonna block like this, because you can eat up so much time trying to find those optimal blocks. So I agree with you. I think there's something to be said about identifying a line that you think is, an 80, 70, 80% viable line, and just rolling with that, maybe tweaking that a little bit so you're saving on time. So I do agree with you. I think there's absolutely nothing. It's easy for us to sit here with no time limit and come up with all the little corner cases.
Right, you can play more conservative here and be like, I have a hand that should win this game. I don't mind dragging it out. So like, I get that as well. Like if the timer is a factor, but like Jedi said, I had a bunch of time to and do the math even, which I'm horrible at when I have a rope. I'm just like, A space, I don't know what's gonna happen.
One thing that I shortcutted, which is what led me to this line, was what uses the most power in this turn, and B, typically the first person that gets to start doing 2 spells in one turn ends up winning that game. So that was, having 7 power allowed me to identify, like, okay, I have access to smithing. I have a bunch of cards that I could play 2 of in this turn. So what's the best use of that? They would have played a weapon already. I think there was a turn or two where we left up biting winds because we always expect the hook sword on 7. And when it didn't come, then we were able to adjust. So that was something as well that led me to it, where I just feel like playing another Draconis, though impactful, isn't the best use of our power this turn. But once again, I could have an argument for it. John, anything to add after our discussion?
No, I think given an infinite amount of time, I would have went for the A space line here eventually. But like when we do these, I try and like do it live, as much as possible, and act as if there's a timer. So that's a natural consequences. Things get missed, and that's what makes these multiple perspectives so good.
Yep.
No, I think I really like that line a lot, and it's probably between what we said, like if I had to pick one to be correct, I think that's probably it.
Yep. The last thing I'm going to add on that is essentially, if we're going off of what this hand did, the last card we drew was Avagraft. I don't remember if we had it on hand already, but one of the things that you can do that I know a lot of more experienced and competitive players do is try not to completely reevaluate the board state every time. Like you wake up every time you draw your card for the turn. Spend as much time as you can while your opponent's thinking to work out your plays and know what you're going to do and set up your plan. So when you draw that card, you do a quick once over, make sure it doesn't change too many things, and then you move on. Like, for example, I already had it in my mind that if I was going to use the Water Conjuring, I would hit the 8/8 and the 5/3 flyer. As soon as I drew the Abergraft, I was like, well, wait a minute. Okay, that takes out the 8/8. So now what's the next best two targets for my Wind Conjuring or Water Conjuring? And so it saved me time there versus if I just kind of dirtled around on my phone, talked to my friends, did other things, and all of a sudden I draw my Abergraft and I reevaluate this entire board state that's been sitting there, then I'm eating up valuable time.
That's a great point. Like, yeah, during your opponent's turn, you should always be giving some consideration to what you're going to do, regardless of what you draw. And like in a case like this, knowing your deck, you would be thinking like, well, if I draw removal, not necessarily Abergraft, but it's like, well, if I draw removal, then this. If I draw land or power, then this. If I draw a flying unit, this. If I draw a ground unit, this. Like you can already have like those basic scenarios planned out to a pretty high degree before your turn even starts. So,
yep, awesome. So that's our what's the play, guys. All right, so to close off our show, we do have another question of the week brought to us by Cal Shadowstep. He managed to cash in his midichlorians and asked us a question to answer on the podcast this week, so that's exactly what we're going to be doing. And Jed, we're maybe going to start with you. I don't know, I actually haven't read this question yet. Hold on. So Cal asks, is there a low threshold where you guys would consider the resources from rare drafting as more important than the small percentage that you might play an on-color card? Do you always take a card that you have a minute minute chance that you might want over any non-draft resources, aka extra dust, shiftstone, premium playable, constructed common, etc.? So Jed, I believe you're primarily limited, correct? Or do you still dabble in constructed?
I dabble a little bit, but yeah, mostly limited.
Okay, so I will go to you and Alex last because Alex has like a billion shiftstone. He's up there with Mum, so he can craft whatever he wants premium. So John, considering that you are like me, pretty even keel, I think you're pretty even split down the difference. Where do you sit on this?
Yeah, I'm also essentially a free-to-play player too. I mean, I did that one purchase of gems better, yeah, when I first started playing, right? And got like the premium sigil pack, and I still have gems from that. So yeah, I mean, I'm basically a free-to-play player on top of that. So for me, like, I don't just like I consider drafting, like, for me it's not a means to an end. Like, it's not where I go to get resources for the game, it's where I go to draft. Right? So I'm probably not like your average player, free to play player necessarily, but I also feel like I do really well in my drafts. So like, I don't think the resource gain and loss is a big issue. Like, it's more of a time thing for me. So like in any given draft, if I open a legendary, I'm probably going to take it, because legendaries are enough shiftstone to where I would consider that. Now, if that unplayable legendary for draft and also unplayable legendary for constructed is up against like a Waystone Gate, for example, like a busted uncommon, like there is still a pretty high chance that I go for that Waystone Gate there. And then like that threshold with rares is so much lower because dusting a regular rare, in my mind is basically like nothing. I'd much rather just do well in my draft at that point, right? So, I mean, I definitely have those thresholds. Like there is a point where, like it's going to be almost impossible for me to pass like a premium legendary or something. 'Cause that is, that's literally just so much shiftstone. You can just craft any legendary in the game. But I mean, man, if that is up against just like the perfect card for my draft deck, I still might go for the winning draft. So
yeah, I'm, unless I have 4 of a legendary, I typically take it. I think I could probably count one hand how many legendaries I've passed. Granted, on stream I do make it a point to say, hey, outside of this legendary, this card is the correct card to pick. But once again, from my collection, because yeah, the return shiftstone dusting a card is 1/4 of the value of it. So if it's a legendary you need, you're just getting so much value taking it. So I do that. I agree with John though. Rares are very easy for me to pass, even earlier in the format when I need every card. I still pass plenty of rares. I think I draft enough where I'm gonna get all the rares just naturally from opening them. The one thing I do that could lead to me potentially taking cards for Shiftstone resources. Occasionally, I do take a shiny or something like that, but the main thing is, and I'm on the boat where since I have access to my deck in real time as I'm drafting, I actually build my deck while I'm drafting. You'll see me on stream where I add cards, I take cards out, I move things around based on what I'm seeing, and that helps me identify when I have to take a card or not. Where I see a decent, there might be a decent 4-drop, but I'm looking at my deck, I'm like, okay, I don't really need a 4-drop, so how much better is this 4-drop than what is, is it going to make the cut? And when I identify that it's not, then I'll go and like, oh, okay, cool, there's a shiny card, or there's an uncommon, or if there's a rare, I'll snag it there. But that's only because I'm building my deck live at the time. I know there's plenty of people that they just go through the entire draft picking the best card they can for their deck, and at the end they're making 10, 12 cuts or whatnot. So that's how I kind of optimize my picks. I always also use that because I hate making cuts. So if I'm making cuts actively during the deck building or drafting process, it's less cuts I have to make at the end. And it also helps me make better decisions, where if we run into that scenario again where I'm like, hey, there's a 2-drop and there's a 4-drop that I want, which one should I take? I can easily look at the deck that I have built and be like, this deck really needs a 2-drop actually. So that helps me break up the decision. So yes, I do value some the resources, but much like John, I'm here to draft. That's what my priority is, and that's what I enjoy. I think it's a different priority for those that draft less. I draft enough, once again, that I am going to get all the rares just through that. So I typically save my Shiftstone for the few times that there's 4 of a rare that I need for a constructed deck that I don't have, but mainly just to finish off my legendaries. That being said, I know people that draft less, you probably might be more inclined to draft a little bit more resource based, but that's also based on the format, on how many playables. Like the previous format, I felt like everybody was making cuts from their deck because it was such a playable rich environment. This new format, it might be to where people are struggling for playables, and so you can't really afford to take those high value picks. But much to just fall back on your question, Cal, that yeah, there is a chance where you're like, okay, how much better is this 3-drop versus the other 5 3-drops in my deck? If it's not that much better, then sure, you can take the more resource heavy card, because at the end of the day, it's only one card in a 45 card deck. There's a very good chance you may not see it in half your games. So something to consider. Man, I felt I was very long-winded on that, so I do apologize. Let's send it over to Jed.
I feel pretty similarly. I mean, for me, the most important resource for me to get out of a draft run is just more gold, so that I can try to draft some more. So I'm gonna focus more on, be more inclined to pick cards that I feel like are gonna strengthen my deck to help me have a longer, deeper, kind of a better draft run. But if there's a fun looking card that is something that I'd like to play in a constructed deck, and particularly legendary, I'm not going to shy away from picking it, even if it's might otherwise make my draft deck on a little bit worse. So I think it just all comes down to kind of like, again, what you're hoping to get out of it and enjoy. And so me personally, I'll be kind of looking more towards picking a powerful uncommon like a Shugo's Hook Sword over kind of a rare drafting for a pack if it's there.
Yeah, no, and very good point on the gold thing as well. That's the other thing. If we are talking straight resources, I agree with you. There's also something to be said about getting enough gold from your draft to be able to draft again, and so having access to even more rares and legendaries. So there's your front end resource gathering, and there's the long-term gathering as well. I think that's a very good point. Well said, Jed. All right, Alex, I know you have so much to say about this, so close up our question of the week, buddy.
I mean, I don't fault anyone for building their collection. We all enjoy the game a little bit differently. So whatever you like about the game, then do it. I mean, when this new set just switched over, people that never draft were doing drafts just to get all the rares and stuff and turn it into shiftstone. So it's like whatever whatever you want to do with your draft. Like, I'm more on Jed's side, where like I look at it as like upgrading those chests and playing the most games that I can out of that draft. So I'm gonna pick the best card for the deck every time, pretty much, unless it's like there's no cards for the deck, or there's absolutely, man, this is a horrible pack one pick one. There's like nothing in this deck. Oh sure, I'll take this legendary even though I'm not going to use it. So like occasionally that'll happen, but usually it doesn't work that way.
The one thing I will add on that, and we'll close it there, is play your games, guys. I don't fault people
Right.
for rare drafting, right? There's people that sit there and they just keep clicking the top left-hand corner, but like, I mean, halfway through the pack, probably after your first 6 or 7 picks, you're probably okay to actually start picking stuff to somewhat look like a deck and play your games, because you never know. Your opponent can get power, they can get power deprived, they can flood, they could not build a good deck, and so you get some additional chest value that way, and who knows, you might even like it.
Yeah. And you can high roll more packs, potentially more legendaries, more shiftstone. So yeah, play your games, please.
So what you're saying is, like, for all of us at least, draft is a sacred place.
Well,
I'm such value loss. Like, that would be kind of fun to try to win those games, or you just took all the rares,
Stipulation
Like,
draft.
yeah, totally. It's like, as a challenge, I would like, okay, well, I did that with my draft. I'm expecting an 0-3, but let's go for it anyway.
Well, plus you also see people posting on the Reddit, of like, hey, look, there's this bronze chest that turned into a diamond. So why not up that chance of that happening as well?
Totally. Never
Great question, Cal. Thanks for that.
All right, sweet. Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. Jed, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it. It was an absolute blast chatting with you. I can talk Eternal all day, as I'm sure our listeners know. Where can people find you at?
I mainly hang out in the help out in the Farming Eternal Discord, so you can find me there, helping people, giving advice about picks in their packs, and helping to build power bases. So if you're looking for a place to try to improve your draft game, definitely check out that Discord. And then every once in a while, I'm able to catch you on your stream, Jedi, but it's not as often as I'd like. But
I appreciate that. That's mighty kind of you, friend. But it's always good. We can catch up on Discord and whatnot. So that's what
Not
matters.
as often as we'd like either.
Okay, speaking of the Discord, you guys can find the link down below, EternalJourney Discord. We're constantly growing. I think we're almost at 300 people now, which honestly sounds pretty insane, all things considered. But yeah, much like the Farming Eternal Discord and the Misplay Discord and stuff, you guys can tune in there. We have a very positive community. Like I said, we have a pet photo channel, which I think makes us a legit Discord now. You can check that out. We have a bunch of other games like D&D and Borderlands going on, as well as just talking a whole lot of Eternal, which I think is great. A lot of people posting the screenshots of their drafts and picks so the community can help out. And I dig it because then I feel like I get the draft when I can't sit at my computer. So thank you guys for all that. Getting a lot of
We've also got... sorry, I was just saying we've also got all these like secret Discord streams going on lately, which are so cool.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point, which leads to streaming. So if you want to catch us officially on Twitch at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ every Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, catch me streaming Scion drafts, regular drafts, deck doctoring, all that good stuff, some tournament runs. But if not, and you want to catch the AKA secret streams, John, go ahead and plug yourself in as well as some of the other guys, if you don't mind.
Well, yes, yeah, I've been doing it. Some other guys have been doing it. It's obviously no drops, so that's the downside. But you get to like just hang out and talk to the people, and so it's like just a big like co-op draft. It's like it's just so much fun. So and it's I don't want to like I keep saying this, but like my internet keeps going out, and it's like a real problem. And so I'm not trying to be on Twitch and just drop connection for everybody without a word. So this way I can give a personal disclaimer before we get started. Like my internet's gonna go out, so when you don't hear from me for a while, don't worry about it. I'll be back eventually.
We're gonna get like 30 people to join the Discord after this episode drops because of this.
I mean, they're legit. Secret streams are fun. The only way to know about them is to be on the Discord. So.
True story. We even had Alex stream once or twice already, which is super dope.
Indeed.
Yep. So see, Discord, Twitch, YouTube. That's right. If you had a hard time visualizing the pack or the what's the play this week, you can just go to the YouTube channel and it will be up there. So you can check that out, as well as the written article breaking that down that will be on Eternal Warcry. Once again, just to plug the charity event, a couple, 2 months ago, I think maybe now, I don't have a horrible track of time. We did do a peasant, which is common and uncommon only competitive constructed format for charity, where we donated to Child's Play. We raised $1,235. So thank you to everyone who did that. We're doing it again. I just have to lock in the date, but we got the crew ready, and it's gonna run even smoother than the last one. So definitely stay tuned for that. But yeah, Alex, John, thank you guys as always for being on the show. Really appreciate you guys.
Thanks for coming on again, Jed. It's awesome, man.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Once again, Jedthehomarid, check him out at Farming Eternals Discord. Jed, you rock. Thank you so much for being on the show. Guys, that's going to do it. So thank you for tuning in this week. Hope you got a little something out of it about the new draft format, as well as getting yourself out of a slump. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. But until then, as always, happy gaming.
Bye.
Take care.
Good luck in your draft queues, everyone.